Hey everybody, Karen here. Welcome back to Unpinned Creative and the next episode in the Christmas journals from scratch. So I have, in the last episode we covered the winter solstice journals with fabric and covered the journals that we're making from cardboard with tissue paper. So that's all nice and dry now, and we're on to the next bit. So I'll start with these fabric covered journals. So these were the ones that were the book covers, and this bit is easy peasy. I want to keep these images because they're in such good condition and they're fun images. So I'm going to trim the edges of the fabric down so that there's just enough to cover the edge of this book. So I want them to be sort of just about there. So I'm just going to tear that and do that all the way around. And I will do the same on the other journal. Just be careful when you're tearing. If your fabric is not on there straight, you can see here, if I'm tearing, it's getting very small. So I'm going to cut that last little bit so that I don't run out of fabric to turn over the edge. Okay, and now I'm just going to trim the corners just by making a diagonal cut across the corner. And then I'm going to glue it down. I'm just using my normal Halma 450 quick dry adhesive because it dries quickly, but I often use wood glue, PVA, Mod Podge, all those things work. It just depends on how long you want to wait for dry time and that sort of thing. This stuff holds strongly and dries quite quickly. And then I just pull the edges as tight as I can. Pushing my thumb down into the crease of the spine. And go around and do the same on all four sides. One book done. So this one doesn't have an image that I would like to keep, so I'm just going to make sure that all four edges are about the same width. So I'll just trim this one. Okay, there we go. That's done, and those are both ready now to start with the decorating. That's the exciting bit. Okay, for these ones, they are all ready to go as well to start, but they need a bit more work to the base before we can start actually decorating. So the first thing I am going to do with those is cover them in a layer of black Mod Podge. So black Mod Podge is just Mod Podge that I've added black acrylic paint to, and that's just to, so it will do two things. It will seal the cover for me, which is great because it's cardboard and very porous, obviously, and also the black is going to give me a dark base to start from to cover all of this. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm just using a wet brush, which means it's a very thin layer. The point is not to get a really opaque black. Translucent is fine. It's just giving me a dark layer to start with rather than a light layer, which is how I like to start. And I should have some paper down. While I'm putting on this layer, I'm looking at the texture of the background, and this is when ideas will start to come to me about what I want to do next, thinking also about the decoration that I'm popping on the cover. I want to do the edges, but I'm not going to worry about the spine because that's going to be all covered up later on. I'm going to wet my brush again just to thin that Mod Podge out a wee bit. There we are. So I will pop that aside to dry, and then I will flip it over and do the same to the inside, and I will start on the other cover and just do exactly the same thing. Just realised I was sliding off camera a bit there, sorry. Okay, so while those two covers dry, and then I can do the inside, the exact same thing. But in the meantime, it's time to work on the decorations that we're putting on. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so moving on to these and how to prepare these for putting onto the covers. So obviously they have a big split or cutout in them that I want to cover up. And to do that, that's the first thing I want to do with them. To do that, now I realise not everyone is going to have these particular shapes or anything like that, and so this may not even be an issue for you, but I'm all about recycling and upcycling and repurposing and things like that. So I just want to be able to give you ideas if you come across things that are interesting and that you could want to use in a different way, then I'm just giving you some different ideas and techniques on how to solve some problems, I suppose, is my intention here. So I want to get rid of this gap somehow. So all of these pieces have little holes in them that I want to do something with. My idea for that is my texture paste. So I use homemade texture paste, and I use it for all sorts of different things, and quite a lot with making covers and 3D elements. So the recipe I use is Mod Podge, gesso and baby powder. And this jar I made a couple of years ago now, and it's still, I'm getting to the end of it, and it had gone quite hard. In my last Ephemerimba video with the bee, I think it was, you would have noticed that the texture paste was really hard. So to solve that issue, I've just added a bit more gesso and some Mod Podge and given it a really good stir, and it's nice and smooth again now, and a good workable texture that I need for this particular exercise. So all I'm going to do, take out my stir stick. I've also been using this stick with this texture paste for the last couple of years, ever since I made it. And I'm actually going to use my favorite tool, my favorite craft tool, which is my finger, and I'm just going to smooth that into the gap. Obviously, if you don't want to use your finger, and I totally get it, most people don't, you can use a piece of card. Let me see if I've got one here. So a sturdy piece of card. Put your texture paste on that and smooth it down. It's a bit like plastering, if you've ever done plastering. It's a little bit like that. So what you'll need to do is keep the cutout on a flat surface, and if you can use a grease-proof baking paper sheet or something like that, then it's not going to stick. So I should have thought about that before I started. I'll just go grab one of those and I will be back. I had a courier bag nearby, so I'll just use that instead. So if you just pop your shapes down on that and leave them to dry, then they won't stick, but you need them to be flat on the surface so that you can get the gap filled up and flat on the back. There are a million different ways you could do this. This is just, like I said, I use texture paste all the time for filling in gaps and stuff like that on my 3D journals, so it's just the go-to for me. And it sets really hard and firm, so I like that. Alright, so that one is done. I'm going to go ahead and do all the rest of them, and we'll come back with the next part of our covers. And while the wooden shapes are drying, and that will probably take a good day maybe, I'm going to do some work on the cardboard shapes for my other two journals. So I just hand drew some elf boots and cut them out of cardboard. Now okay, where was I before the dog rudely interrupted? So I have hand-drawn elf boot shapes and cut them out of cardboard. Now I have cut one out of a single layer of cardboard, quite heavy cardboard, and one of the shapes I have put 2 layers of cardboard on, and I'll explain that to you when I'm putting the journal cover together. And then I've just done the same thing, and this is a bit more of a witchy vibe boot, so you could still use it as a elf boot, or you could use it as a witch's boot, I think. So and I've done the same thing, cut out 3 layers from card, 2 I have joined together, and 1 is just a single layer. And to get those ready for decorating, I'm just going to cover them in brown paper bag like I did with the cardboard covers that we're making. So I'll go ahead and do that and I'll be back. Okay, so here are the boots now. I've covered them. I actually didn't use paper bag, I used newsprint to cover them because it was slightly thinner, and because these have so many curves in them, it was easier to go around the curves and things like that. So now all I'm going to do with those is the same thing as I'm doing with the covers, which is cover them in a layer of the black Mod Podge. So for these I won't do the backs, I'm just going to do the fronts because the back of them is going to be glued down onto the cover, and I need to do the sides as well. So this is all going to be covered up in the end, but I just want a dark base layer. So it doesn't have to be tidy, it doesn't have to be perfect by any means, it can just be a really quick job. But I do want to get into all the crevices and nooks and crannies created by the paper, just in case. Okay, so I'll go ahead and do all the rest of those. So because I'm making these videos and posting them as I go, and because I don't know yet where these journals are going, this is how I craft. I just start crafting and see what happens. So I can't show you what they're going to look like in the end, but once I've finished this series of these 4 journals, I will take a photo of them all and put it at the start of the first video, so that in the future everyone can see what they're making before they start making it. In the meantime, there are, you know, just different techniques and stuff that you might learn, maybe. Okay, I'm going to let all those dry. Clean myself up a wee bit. And now we can move on to our wooden shapes. So let me pop this out of the way. Okay, our wooden shapes. So I have filled in the holes with texture paste. One thing with texture paste is as it dries, it shrinks a bit. So you probably will need to go in and fill in those gaps a wee bit more. I've covered the front in the texture paste just a wee bit. I haven't made it too textured, but you can see it's just roughed up the surface a bit. And I may have to go back to a few of these and add some more texture paste over those big holes because it has shrunk again. But in the meantime, what I want to do is just go and clean up the edges. So where I've got texture paste that I don't want it, like here, there's a big, because we all know I'm not the tidiest crafter, so I'm just going to use my craft knife and scrape away the extra bits that I don't need or don't want. But I'm not going to be too fussy because nothing in nature is exactly perfect. I mean, I think it's perfect, but it's not all straight lines and, you know, perfectly rounded corners or anything like that. So I'm happy with that one. I'm not going to sand them flat. I'm going to leave the rough texture on them. And I haven't done the back, obviously, because that's going to be glued down onto the covers. So I'm just going to do that for all of these pieces. Okay, I am happy with those. So I'm just going to grab my texture paste and go back over a couple of them. You can see this one is still really prominent. And fill those in and let them dry. The other thing that you could use instead of texture paste is air dry clay. That would work really well as well, but wouldn't give you the texture over the top, although you could make a slurry with it if you wanted to. Okay, while I am waiting for everything to dry, we can start thinking about the background for these cloth covers. So on this one, get rid of all the threads. This is the one that is going to have the trees. So 2 trees and the deer on it. So I would like to put something else further in the background. I like to work on my covers flat like this so I can see, and often I put stuff on the back of the covers as well, so I take that into consideration. So there are lots of options here. I could take some paper and put paper in the background, which would be quite cool. I could take some more fabric and put some fabric in the background, which would also be cool. I could also take my texture paste and add some stenciling with my texture paste. to the back and the front. I'm going to have a think about that and see what I can come up with. One thing I've noticed while I am playing around and trying to figure out what I'm going to do in the background of this cover is that the bases of these trees are far too wide. And the initial decoration where the two trees fitted together and they stood up, the base needed to be wide for the tree to stand, but I think it doesn't look good for the purpose that I'm using them for, so I'm going to cut those down a bit. So I'm just going to take a pencil and a ruler and figure out where I would like to cut them down. I don't want them too thin, I just want to take some off. And I might actually cut them on a very slight angle. As a tree would typically, tree trunk would typically grow. Now I'm going to see if I can cut them with my craft knife. Let me move that out of the way. Okay, so I have trimmed down those tree trunks. This one I managed to break off, but I've attached it with some masking tape, and that won't matter once it's all glued down onto the cover. That'll just hold it in the meantime. And I think I know where I'm going now with this journal. So what I'm going to do is the cover will go like this, these wooden pieces will go something like this. Something like that, anyway. I'll figure it out. I will figure it out, but they'll go sort of in that kind of a layout, that kind of a triangle. And then what I want to do is make it look like it's nighttime and they're kind of coming out of the mist. So I have got some of this very pale blue, it's kind of greeny blue chiffon, and I'm going to lay that over the top, and I'll show you how I'm going to adhere that and everything. But what that means is I'm going to leave the background fabric as it is. Then the next layer is going to be these wooden elements, and then this will be the next layer after that, and then there may be more on top of that. I will decide as I get there. So the next step in this particular cover is to paint these wooden elements that are going to go on there. And I think for this cover I'll be doing a very similar thing, very similar concept at this stage. I think that's what I'm going to do. So for now I'm going to separate the two different types of covers, seeing as we've done the backgrounds and everything, and just work on the two fabric covered books at one time and the two cardboard book covers in another video. So I am going to stop this video here for now. I know it's nothing much exciting has happened. I appreciate that, but I want to start the next video with just these two book covers, and we'll get into painting and finishing off the covers from there. So thanks again for joining me. This is going to be a bits and pieces kind of series, but I think it'll be valuable for people that are wanting to make their own covers, three-dimensional covers, the types of covers that I really love, and lots of people often ask me how I do these things, so hence this video series. So Thanks for joining in, and I'll see you in the next one.